Check Podcasts.
Hey everyone, welcome to Political Capital. Once again, your source for all the latest in BC politics news. Thank you so much for being here, whether you're listening on an audio podcast, whether you're watching us on Check TV on Sundays, or whether you're watching us on YouTube. We really appreciate you being here each and every week because it's so busy, because there is so much going on that we want to jump right into this with our pod squad. The first time without McLean K, who has transcended off into the distance in another dimension, I guess. But we're missing him. But we have the three panelists, our original core kind of three panelists now going forward on the show. We have Katy Merrifield, we have Jillian Oliver, and we have Jeff Ferrier. Thank you for being here and explaining politics to everyone each and every week. Our first topic is something that we have talked about a little bit in the past: gas prices. They continue to rise. We had an issue this week where on the day that prices jumped to $2.21 a litre in Metro Vancouver and Victoria, the government had a press conference about boosting low-carbon fuel standards for diesel and gas that will actually raise the price eventually of those. It was a bit of an optics thing where the collision of the NDP's kind of climate change plans and affordability plans collided for them, highlighting a really interesting conversation we're going to have now, hopefully, about how that all works for a government that has made affordability kind of a big part of its electoral success. Katy, coming to you first on this. We also did have the BC Liberals propose a plan this week that is up for debate as well. Gas prices, where are we? How big of a political issue is this? And what should you think the government be looking at as it kind of grapples with this?
So I want to look at this at kind of a macro level here. I think one of the challenges of big tent brokerage parties with competing internal factions and competing stakeholders is the Great Balancing Act. Like, looking back, when the Greens were part of CASA in their power sharing agreement, I think the NDP automatically secured environmental credentials. And since their relationship is broken down in a rather spectacular fashion, the NDP has two issues. One, they have to retain their environment credentials internally to environmental stakeholders and to the general public. And then two, it's evident to anyone with half a functioning brain cell that they despise the Green Party and would like to electorally eliminate them. And so I think it's arguable on point two that their animosity could potentially cloud their common sense. But the facts are clear. Gas prices are up nearly $1 a liter since the NDP were sworn into government, and they were the highest in North America prior to Russia's war on Ukraine. So I think if this was an issue at the time when they removed MSP fees and bridge tolls years ago, instead of at a time where inflation is high, food is unaffordable, and housing prices are still ludicrous, they may have been able to skate past this issue. But, the NDP was the party of affordability back in 2017 when they benefited enormously from the fiscal prudence and healthy surplus that left by the BC Liberals. But now, faced with hesitancy from environmental stakeholders, gluttony for revenue, and no plans to get BC's books back on track, they can't really claim that ground anymore. And I think that's the perfect opportunity for Kevin Falcon and the BC Liberals to seize.
The Liberal plan, and the only move government can make here, is to cut some type of taxes off the price of fuel. And the Liberals have proposed a fuel tax cut like Alberta, some sort of carbon rebate. Jeff, the government is saying repeatedly that gas companies would just scoop up those profits, and it's sticking to its $110 ICBC rebate that's coming out this month for people. Do you think that position is going to hold, or where do you think government's at on this?
I think government, what they're doing is something that they could do that's within their power and that will benefit families in British Columbia. I'm sure they'll look to see if there are other ways that they can help people who are hurt by cost of living. I think that in terms of, first of all, the NDP's relationship with the Greens, I will say that in terms of the criticisms of that, the NDP won a majority government, so I think maybe they're not too worried about where the status of the CASA secretariat is at anymore. Gas prices are a challenge. There
is no CASA secretariat.
Exactly. That is my point. That is the point that I'm making.
Yeah,
that is the point that I'm making. Gas prices are a challenge for all governments around the world. You saw before Putin's invasion of Russia, West Texas Intermediate gas was around $65 per barrel. Now with sanctions, it's $110 a barrel. And solidarity with Ukraine is more about putting a flag of Ukraine on your Twitter profile. It's about the sanctions on Russia and the cost that we bear as a result of our shared sacrifice. And in terms of the root causes of this, to suggest that it's a provincial government in Canada that's driving this is silly. And I think that if this is a real opportunity for Kevin Falcon, if he's going to realize this opportunity, he's going to have to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine and normalize Russia's relationship with the EU. Otherwise, anything he's suggesting won't bring down prices, and everything that he's doing is for his own political gain and won't serve the interests of British Columbians who are feeling pain at the pumps.
That's an easy task for a new premier one day. Just first 100 days, broker peace in the Middle East, there in Europe, and maybe the Middle East as well. I think that argument, which makes a lot of sense as well. I think the counterpoint that's being brought up in the Ledge is that somehow BC had high fuel prices before the Russian invasion as well, and much higher than Alberta and Washington State. And that was one of the questions brought to the CEO of the Parkland refinery this week, who found himself under fire at a press conference he attended with the energy minister on low carbon fuel standards, and took it in the face for 30 minutes from reporters being like, what's going on here? Can't you do anything as you reap record profits as an oil and gas company? And he didn't have any answers either. Jillian, this tension between climate change policies, which actually are intended to raise the price of conventional fuels to push people off of them at a time when people are angry about the affordability issues, that tension seems very fascinating to me. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and I think, on top of that, the longer that the effects of climate change go unmitigated, the more that we'll see those costs borne by people who are, already economically disadvantaged, just like we see, with the disasters coming out of Lytton in the last summer. I think it really underscores that the government needs to think creatively about how to make climate policy equitable, and how to sort of craft it with an affordability lens. I read a really interesting article from one of the Ontario provincial health officers suggesting that we actually moved to a work from home situation for everyone who is able to do it in January, when cold and flu season comes, when COVID comes, and that would accomplish a lot of outcomes like keeping people healthy, reducing strain on the healthcare system, and also probably improving people's mental health and quality of life. So I think that's just sort of like an example of the kind of creative thinking that the government should be looking at to see, how can they meet all of these goals, make life more affordable, make it, more enjoyable, help people's mental health, and also address climate change at the same time. I think, little rebates here and there, little measures here and there aren't going to cut it when we're dealing with these big systemic issues.
That work from home idea is very interesting. I've noticed watching the provincial service, this whipsaw effect from the BC government's provincial service. Everyone's got to go back to work. You need to come back to work physically. And I think that might be happening in a lot of workplaces. Get back here and let's get back to normal. And that is an interesting idea of kind of alleviating gas pressures by saying you can work from home if you have to, although some of the lowest income people working at 7-Eleven or Subway or whatever aren't going to have that option either. And those are the folks who the government's going to be under pressure from as well. I don't know. Anyone have any final thoughts on this one? They want to jump in before we move on? I find it such an interesting topic, because it's not really under the province's control, but there's a lot of pressure, but there's environmental, it's all sorts of tied up in lots of different things, Katy.
Well, I just want to follow up on, politicians capitalizing for their own provincial gain. Let's turn that back on the NDP and talk about the entire election, which was called on a falsehood, deliberately designed to capitalize on NDP fortunes and punish the Greens and the BC Liberals. In terms of what the province has under their control, there are a series of taxes that folks pay at the pump: carbon tax, TransLink tax, fuel tax, federal excise tax, GST. Some of these are within the province's control, and they do have the levers to temporarily reduce prices. And in the midst of an affordability crisis, I think the BC Liberals are going to come off looking a lot better here, that they're at least trying to do something to punish the working poor who would not be able to work from home.
I agree that they're going to punish the working poor, as you just said. If they're going to remove taxes, the TransLink tax, access to SkyTrain in the regions that are where working class people, because of a lack of affordable housing in Vancouver, and we can talk about that on another show, they depend on that. They need expansion of that. And if you take that tax off, then there's no money for that. They depend on good health care. They depend on education. They depend on having money to pay for those removing of bridge tolls, to remove MSP. And if we start transferring that money to profits for the companies who will benefit, because they'll eat up whatever the province gives up in taxes. That's what always happens. That's money that's taken away from working class people and the things that they depend on that the government provides. And it's not going to get us any further ahead.
One of Jillian will bring you in just to close this off, but one of the problems I think on both of those arguments is the pricing of gas is insane. Like, no one understands how it is priced. We've done reviews into this for months that conclude that the market isn't competitive. Small numbers of companies own the distribution. We're limited by our supply because we only have one pipeline. You can't, like, this is a price of a bag of chips and the government was going to knock 13 cents off and you could see it and it would be understandable. That'd be one thing. You take 13 cents off the price of gas when you don't understand how it's priced, and then it goes back up and then profits are eaten away, Jeff, like you said, or something else happens in the world and suddenly, the gas price goes up. The government is kind of, trying to hold on to Jello as it slips through its fingers if it goes that route. And you're right. Gas prices and carbon taxes are worth $4 billion a year for government that it uses for other things, so it loses that revenue. I do find it interesting, and I've always wondered why the government doesn't go the route of public transit and say, for example, make it free. I think the cost of that, I guess, must be prohibitive, because that would be a really easy solution to help people at this time when gas prices are so high. Jillian, anything jump out at you? Close us off on this topic.
Yeah, well, I think, the Greens have proposed temporary free transit, which can help because that can help people sort of, get more accustomed to using the system, help justify more investment in expanding it if there's more users. And then, you bring fees back in the longer term to make it, more financially stable. I think they can also look at, instead of removing the carbon tax, how do you sort of readjust the way that the low income supplement or rebate that's given out it is distributed, because right now it does just go into general revenue. It's a little bit amorphous. There's no accounting to make sure that money is actually, either going to help people that are facing increased costs or actually going to mitigate the effects of climate change. So I think there are tools within in the government's disposal that they can look at to sort of meet both goals if they think a little more creatively.
And I just want to jump in real quick here and say, good idea, Rob, on the price caps on chips. I'm in favor of that. Public health folks would not like that, but $6 for a bag of chips, that's outrageous.
I agree. I think we're all in agreement.
I agree.
Let's jump into the next topic, which is one that I don't think we've talked about on the show before, but there's been a lot of public anxiety that's been caused by the leaked U.S. Supreme Court draft ruling on Roe v. Wade, or a woman's right to abortion in the United States. And that has led to discussion in Canada, where the issue of abortion was fully legalized more than 30 years ago, where it is a procedure that is a healthcare procedure administered by the provinces. So there was some discussion in the last couple of weeks from a provincial level of where everyone stands on this. The finance minister saying over her dead body, will abortion rights change in this province? The Greens agreeing with that. The Liberal leader, Kevin Falcon, saying he personally is pro women's right to choose. And also that, although there are some MLAs in his party that may disagree with that, he is not intending as a government to do any change or change this issue at all. That's where the situation stands. There was an anti-abortion rally in the front of the legislature this week, which brought a couple hundred people out. And I know that turned into a little bit of a political thing. I just want to go around here, and Jillian, we'll start with you. Is this an issue that should be debated in BC politics right now? If so, how do we begin to deal with it, the discussion of it in a productive fashion, and is it going to be used for purposes in a situation that it probably shouldn't be used for? What do you make of this?
Yeah, well, I think it is serious, like a serious issue that everyone should take seriously, because I think there's an assumption often with progress that it's a straight line, and seeing what's happening in the States is really scary for people, especially people who were around when people didn't have access to reproductive rights. But yeah, I think that often in Canadian politics, because the issue has been decided, it doesn't feel like there's imminent danger. It sort of becomes more of like a branding, like sort of like moral signifying issue, when there are actually still restrictions on access in BC, especially for people living in northern and rural communities. All of the surgical abortion centers are located in the south of the province. The NDP government did move in 2018 to make the abortion pill free of charge and available at pharmacies, but that only is available up to 9 weeks of pregnancy. And there's lots of other medical reasons like ectopic pregnancies, why that is not an option for people. So, and then of course the promise to give free contraception as well, which is on the same spectrum of the issue. So I think it's incumbent on every MLA to talk about this issue in terms of the services and that they're actually delivering for people, because that's how it really affects people's lives.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I do think the free contraception, for example, that is a particularly costly issue for women in the province that's not covered, is something the government's talked about but has yet to actually execute on. So you're right, that's a very practical, real provincial responsibility that could be done right now related to this issue that is worth certainly talking about. Katy, where is this issue provincially? Is it going to be an issue? And if so, how is it going to be an issue, do you think?
Look, I think it's unfortunate that domestic politics here in Canada have a tendency to get hijacked by movements in the US that bear little to no relevance here. Very predictably, when the draft opinion on Roe v. Wade was leaked, every left-leaning party in this country immediately jumped on the opportunity to wedge center-right parties. Speaking to our provincial landscape here in BC, I think Vaughn Palmer hit it on the head in his column 4 days ago. The byline was, if abortion was to re-enter the political debate in BC, it'll be from a political party with no MLAs. Like, that is fact. I know the NDP are going to try their hardest, and they have been already, to suggest that BC Liberals will allow dangerous pro-life views in their government. That is the furthest thing from the truth. Speaking to history here, in the late 80s, the Social Credit Party under Bill Vanderzem destroyed the Free Enterprise Coalition in British Columbia over abortion. It took 10 years to rebuild. And from Gordon Campbell to Christy Clark, the party has remained steadfast in their commitment to support a women's right to choose and would do absolutely nothing to restrict or revoke access to abortion, period.
Jeff, what do you think?
Ferrier's law of politics. When a party aspiring to government calls an issue a distraction or not worth discussing, you've uncovered an issue that is important to explore and understand. And so it is with abortion and the BC Liberals. And I think it's illuminative, and it tells us about Kevin Falk and the challenges he has with the Big Tent Party and his leadership. The government's clear on its stand on abortion. Abortion's health care. The decision belongs to a person who's pregnant and their doctor. I think Jillian raises really important questions around access to the service, particularly in rural and remote communities. So we should keep talking about that for sure. When I look at what Kevin Falken is doing here, he's taking an approach that that's based on electoral calculations over principle, it appears to me. He's appealing to urban voters by stating his personal belief in a woman's right to choose, and I don't doubt that is his personal belief for a second, and I commend him for having that. But he's countenancing others in his caucus like Katy Merrifield, who've very clearly stated that they would limit access. They would prefer to limit access to abortion given the opportunity. And he's promised free votes on matters of conscience, at least at times during the leadership contest. And this is to appeal to people who showed up on the legislature steps to protest abortion this week. Folks like former BC Liberal MLA Lori Thronis, and good on the BC Liberals for giving him the boot. But I think he has a leadership opportunity here, quite frankly. I think this is a chance for him to really put a stamp on the party in the new direction that he wants to take. He could do what Prime Minister Trudeau did when he became leader of a federal party in a similar situation. Lay down the law. I'm the leader, so long as I'm leader. If you want to be part of the party, benefit from caucus funding, and be part of the party's electoral machine and benefit from that, believe whatever you want. But when it comes time to talk and vote, your position is that abortion is a woman's right to choose, end of story.
But just to play devil's advocate on that, not everyone in this province in Canada believes in that position. They have religious beliefs. Is it the right move? Like, for a leader to say, this is the party's position, this is my position, this is what we're going to do, to then eject everyone from the party who personally has a different view, does that not, should we not have a small number of MLAs in the legislature who reflect a different opinion in society, I guess is my question. Like, does it make sense to just wipe them out of the party when there are people in the province who have a different view on it?
I'm not suggesting that people should believe any differently than what they believe right now. I'm not suggesting that anyone in the BC Liberal or BC Greens or BC NDP should change their own personal beliefs about the issue of abortion. They are free to choose to do what they want in their lives based on their faith or humanist considerations and make that decision for themselves. And that's cool. But when it comes time to imposing that view onto others, when it's a matter of a woman's freedom to choose, I think there's believe what you want, but when it comes time to vote to impose beliefs on others, which are wrong, no.
I don't know. What is the purpose of the legislature if not to reflect society's different views and then debate and then come to positions? I don't know. It's an interesting one that I think strikes at some sort of political wedge issues we might be seeing going forward. I'm not entirely sure, but I found the discussion of it kind of interesting in the last couple of weeks. Well, it's a good discussion. There were a lot of serious topics here at the legislature this week and on this week's show. And we just want to end on a bit of a lighter note here with actually something that caught a lot of attention in the House, a feel-good moment perhaps of NDP MLA Rick Glumac, who happens to be the MLA for Port Moody Coquitlam, who stood up in the House and professed his love to his partner Haven and asked her to marry him on the floor of the legislature. Let's take a look at that.
And I just want to say you fill my heart with love, and I'm not afraid to share that with everyone. And I just have one question for you. Will you marry me? I think that was a yes, but in order to make it official, I'm going to go out of the gallery to make it official. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It was, in fact, a yes. And there was a nice interview afterwards with Rick and his fiance about this moment at the legislature. But, you know, for some people, they're watching this and they're going, man, that's, I think the first question to him was, that's a pretty big swing, Rick, that you took in public on this. Those public proposals are always a thing for people. We wanted to do a hot take here. Go around the panel. If you would ever propose to someone in public this way, whether it's on the floor of the legislature, on the Jumbotron, at a Canucks game, how do you feel about that? Katy, when I saw this, I instantly thought what your take on this might be.
Would I propose to somebody on a Jumbotron? That is the question, Rob?
Yes, that's the question.
No, because I don't know, that entire episode for me was about as romantic as my impromptu marriage in Vegas 12 years ago. I will not be answering any questions on that.
Oh, but I have so many questions about the Elvis Chapel. I'm just got an image in my mind now.
Little White Wedding Chapel.
Holy moly. Okay, well, that's a whole other show on that. Jeff, what do you think of public proposals, this proposal, and if you'd ever do it on a Jumbotron or in the floor of the House?
Yeah, people want some good fun and go down a rabbit hole. Go to YouTube and search marriage proposal fails, and you'll see how lots of these sorts of things go bad, and it's good fun. I will say on this one particularly, nothing but happiness to the happy couple, but I can't think of anything less romantic than a legislature floor proposal, except maybe the time I was at a World Wrestling Entertainment event and there was a proposal there. So good job, Rick. Wish you all the best. Nice work.
Jillian, would your heart swoon at being proposed to on the floor of the legislature?
No, I would be personally mortified. However, I do think that, you know, a proposal should fit the couple in question, and being a politician's spouse is fairly thankless. And so perhaps this is appropriate given the circumstances.
I wouldn't be a fan of it just because I would be mortified or at the risk that someone would say no. And then I'd be standing there on the floor of the house with the camera on and silence, and that wouldn't be good. But that was not the issue for Rick Glumac. He got a resounding yes from the gallery. A nice ring that was showed off afterwards. Everyone was giving him high fives and taking his picture. So a good moment for him, a bit of a lighter moment in the legislature. I have never seen a proposal on the floor of the House. There was some research done showing it's not the first time in a Commonwealth Parliament that has occurred before, but I think it's probably the first time in BC history that's happened. So a nice moment.
I've seen lots of divorces
Yeah.
Exactly.
caused by life in the
floor of the
legislature.
House.
But so it's good. It's good we have something different this time. Yeah.
I believe that's called the circle of political life that just kind of goes around. Yes. Yeah. Maybe they'll get married in the House. I don't know if the Speaker has the power to marry couples, probably, but I asked them that question. They said, no, that wouldn't be fun. So that was the end of the legislative session this week, or the highlight of the legislative session. Actually continues for a couple more weeks. Kevin Falcon is expected to be sworn in as an MLA on Monday, so the dynamic there is going to be much different, and we'll talk about that on next week's show. Thank you so much for watching Political Capital. Thank you for subscribing to the podcast, and we will see you next week on the show.